All right. So we are live now with the one and only Benny Wallington, all the way from Queensland on the Gold Coast in Australia. An absolute delight to be having him on our show. He is at a late hour of the evening, I guess getting to the late hour of the evening, close to 7 p.m. there. But welcome, Benny, to our fifth Epiq Thursdays today. How are you doing?
Thanks, mate. Yeah, pleasure to be here. Shame I can't be there hanging out live with you, but this is the best we can do at the moment.
Well, you know what? I think we can connect with the fact that you're on the Gold Coast as well. So we do have some similarity in terms of the beach and the sun and everything else as well, right?
Totally. Yeah, the greenery.
So let me, for those who are kind of tuning into Epiq Thursdays for the first time, this is a weekly show. It's a 20-minute live. We've been doing this with the whole intention of providing the entrepreneur and the executives, the sort of high-performing individuals, an avenue to learn quick and actionable tips on how to reach peak performance through flow states, through breath work, through a whole range of activities and protocols that enable them to kind of shift into that higher state on demand. And Benny is a certified, flow coach with the Flow Genome Project. He's about peak performance. So we'll talk about that, but a quick intro on Benny's impressive credentials, so we don't kind of miss out on what he is doing or has been doing in the world so far. He's been designing workshops and systems for a transition to a thriving planet. He knows that's possible from his heart. He co-founded a community called Reunion, which is basically emerging storytellers, sense makers, and activists who are collectively making a regenerative future. And he had this impressive achievement where he helped create a viral campaign in the Australian elections to get people to vote for the planet over the politicians. I'm sure that would have gone very well. And his health movement called 101 Tokens has assisted thousands of people across the world to change their habits through the lens that vices, whether it's eating, partying, phone addictions, etc., can be a source of positivity and even conducive to optimal performance. So with that being said, he's got a whole bunch of things and we have 20 minutes so we can touch on many, many things there. But I'm very intrigued because our topic today is how do you optimize performance and vices for the mindful entrepreneur? For some people, that may be an oxymoron, but we'll get to that part later. How do you define a mindful entrepreneur, Benny?
Yeah, I guess the way for me to think about it is quite simply the entrepreneur who stops to think about how they are showing up and how they are performing in their business, but also more importantly, sometimes at home. So a kind of holistic health approach to entrepreneurship would be a mindful entrepreneur, but literally just starting with that, am I pausing and taking the time to reflect on my behaviors, and is that aligning to my values?
Absolutely. All right. I kind of failed on saying this, that, the people who will be logging in from various parts as well. I know that Benny's in Australia, but we have people in Dubai. So whoever is signing in, say hello, share your love, your heart, your kind of thumbs up for Benny. He's doing this as a special favor for us. Really appreciate that. So mindful entrepreneur, someone who can take stock, knows what he's doing as opposed to just hustling through. How does that person then optimize performance? What does that really even mean in that sense?
Well, I think optimal performance, I really love the word optimal over so much peak, because optimal is talking about, being at the right tempo and rhythm at the right time. And so being, like you mentioned, breath work and practices like that before, which is fantastic. So those kind of daily practices that we have that are almost non-negotiables, even when the going gets tough. Finding time to be able to just take that extra breath or two to settle yourself. Because as we know with entrepreneurship and the fast-paced and sometimes tumultuous goings on when you're doing multiple projects or you got clients calling all the time, you can find it hard to even find time to actually take a breath. And so that's what I think optimal performance is about, being able to have in your tool belt many things that can kind of help you regulate your state and show up your best at all times.
So when you are, coaching people or working with different stakeholders, whether it's individuals, politicians, the world, when you see someone, what's your first sign that this person is in trouble?
Oh, probably sleep, lack of sleep, high levels of anxiety. If they don't have any practices, like, those baseline practices of, do I have a sleep practice? Do I have a meditative practice, like a mindfulness practice? What's my nutrition like? Am I recovering? Everyone forgets about recovery. Some people are like, oh yeah, you know, I sit on the couch and watch Netflix to wind down. It's like, that's not recovery. So what I'm really looking for is just triaging. And also my favorite one is, are they happy on a Monday? I call it the happy Monday metric. So with my clients, if I'm doing a measurement, that's a very important one. So what are we rating? Just simply out of 10 on a Monday morning. And so my opinion, if you can be going into work on a Monday morning, absolutely firing and stoked, that goes a long way for you to be conducive to sort of optimal performance throughout the week.
Cool. So, I mean, again, that's a pretty interesting, right? So, I mean, over here we'll say happy Sunday, because in Dubai, you know, the Monday is probably the second day of the week. So if they're doing happy Monday, they're like, did you sleep yesterday? That would be another challenge, I suppose. But to those, like, whatever that happy first day of the week is, again, you know, what would you expect them to have done by way of recovery, active recovery, I guess is what you're referring to, that would help them, you know, feel that, yes, this is a great start to the week. I'm feeling sort of in the right frame of mind. I'm feeling fit and healthy, physically speaking. Emotionally, I feel centered, and all those things, I guess, right? So in your mind, when you, again, are speaking with your clients and saying, guys, are you rating yourself high score? And someone says, I rated myself a 5. What are maybe the 3 to 5 things you want them to look at and rate themselves on to get that cumulative score, perhaps, for that happy Monday or happy Sunday?
Totally. So my favorite thing to say is, are you getting out of your head and into your body? So things like any kind of movement. So rather than sitting on the couch and watching Netflix, potentially you can still listen to a podcast, but go for a walk, get out in nature, breathe the fresh air. So really 3 to 5 things would be, what are your practices like just before you're going to sleep? Are you making sure that you're switching off the blue lights? Are you having some connection time with your partner or your family? Is it meaningful conversation and not just, you know, run of the mill sorts of stuff? Do you have a healthy relationship with nutrition? Are you drinking enough water? That generally tends to be one of the ones that people forget to do. But yeah, I basically will really just ask them where they're at the moment. Like, what are the practices that they really love and that they believe are conducive to a healthy lifestyle, and then start from there and build on those.
I want to give a shout out to one of our watchers right now, Moeen. He's been watching, I think, all of our shows, and today he's up at 5 a.m. his time. I think he's in the
Legend.
US. So he's keeping up with wherever we are going in the world, whether it's on the West Coast, the East Coast, or in Dubai. So, you know, a big shout out and high five to him. Now, the part that I'm super intrigued about, because I'm like, I've got to have Benny on the show for this, is you talk about optimizing vices. And I'm like, when I first saw that, I'm like, okay, hold on. What's he actually saying? Let me read that again. Is that like the right word, or is he saying optimizing rice nutrition or something? No, it's optimizing vices. So what do you mean when you say optimizing vices?
So my perspective is that vices get a bad rap. So, and to give a definition of a vice, it's usually things that we do that are a little bit naughty and can get us into trouble. So whether that's eating the wrong foods, whether that is stuff like Netflix, whether it is our phones. I always say, you know, your phones can be a portal to all the information in the world, and they can also be basically have you hogtied and kind of bring you down, ruin relationships, which is what they're meant to be there to build, you know. But because they get a bad rap, I always like to think of these things as that we're actually giving them the power. So all of these things like food, like phones, they're neutral. And so to optimize them, it's like, well, how am I operating with this thing, with this tool, in a way that is conducive to my success? And generally that will always come back to ritualistic living. So it's not necessarily sort of, you know, going to church or anything like that. It's just in my opinion, a ritual is something that we do that we are proud of and that we'd be proud to tell our friends and family about, and that is conducive to where we're heading. So for an entrepreneur, it's the habits, using your phone in a way that's conducive to the goals that you're trying to hit. Eating in a way that gives you the right fuel, so then you can show up your best. If you have to work those mega days, we all do sometimes. What am I doing? Like, how am I giving myself self-love so then I can fire at optimal performance? And it's really fun to play with vices because it's often a lot of the stuff that we sweep under the carpet. And I'm like, oh yeah, but that's just on the weekends. And then, oh, sometimes it creeps into the week, and then all of a sudden it's, you know, it's a new habit. So yeah, I love to spin the vice optimization.
But I mean, again, isn't the case like, as you said rightly, the last point, right? To some people, they may just kind of not be very, I guess, focused on that. They may treat that, they may be flippant about it. They may think, oh, you know what, it's just the weekend thing, or it's just 5 minutes, or whatever the sort of, you know, I guess metric is they're using to sort of self-sabotage their kind of perspective on this. So I'm kind of thinking in your mind, when someone is looking at their vice portfolio, if I can call it, right? How would they kind of take a step back and say, okay, well, you know what, I'm eating not the right food, I'm watching, I'm taking too much phone, I'm probably partying a lot, for example, or I'm kind of doing other sort of naughty stuff, as you're saying. What is their way to figure that they're in the right balance? I mean, is it a link to their values, their goals, or what's like the mirror they need to look at? And do they even have that capacity of self-awareness to look at that mirror and kind of ask them the tough questions? So, you know, where do you start? Because I'm sure, I mean, you talk about sleep. I mean, I'd be guilty and proven guilty forever, like in not having that, you know, nailed. And it's like I won't say a vice, but it's definitely an area I need to work at. So how would you help people think through this in a way that they can find the right balance for wherever they are? Because there's no right number, I guess. It could be 2 minutes for someone and 20 minutes for someone else.
I love that you've mentioned that as well, because unfortunately, a lot of the time when it comes to health, we have kind of like the standard guidelines, and then the doctors have to say, you know, you can only have this much, but everyone's different, right? And everyone knows their own body better than anyone else. Fortunately, we've got technologies that can tell us a lot of this stuff now. So I guess my very first kind of soiree with vice optimization was with my company, 101 Tokens. And the simple system is every time you interact with the vice, the next day you say whether it was worth it or not, yes or no. And basically what you're doing is, and we've got an app for this, but basically what you're doing is you're drawing out patterns. So like, if it was worth it, like, why was it worth it? If it wasn't worth it, okay, well now I'm sitting in that awareness, that mindfulness, like what keeps showing up in my life, and how can I transition out of that vice? How can I turn that into something that is conducive? And on my app, you either get greens or reds, and it gives you your stats. So you just either go, oh, I'm starting to get greens and greens and greens and greens. And when you get to that point, it's like you can, and you know, with your study of flow as well, you can dial up the difficulty to keep pushing yourself. So depending on what kind of person you are, but talking to entrepreneurs, they're always trying to get that little edge. So it's always a competition of sorts. So it's, once you get to that level, how do you get to the next level? And with some vices, they disappear because you realize that they're not actually part of a successful life for you. With other ones, they remain a friend, and sometimes you slip up, but it's not about kind of giving yourself a hard word all the time. It's about, okay, well, I've made a mistake. How do I improve next time?
Yeah, and that's so powerful. I mean, you're gamifying, in a sense, this whole process. To some people, gives that competitive element that helps them figure that, you know, I cannot fail, or at least I don't want to be seen as publicly failing, because maybe there's like a system of leaderboarding, etc., that I presume helps someone else see how they're getting, you know, whatever the tokens are, as you're saying. And I think that's useful because sometimes people take themselves too seriously as well on this. I think that's the other side of this as well, right? That they don't kind of see that, look, there is a way to deal with this without getting so stressed out that you're creating another vice and another sort of the secondary effect.
Well, that's another great point that you just bring up, because a lot of people they'll optimize a vice. It's like, oh, stop eating chocolate. But then all of a sudden now I'm, you know, watching more Netflix or something like that, you know, and then you really got to do the work. You're like, well, okay, what's this kind of root cause that's pulling me down? What am I trying to, it's usually escapism a lot of the time. Like, what am I escaping from? And then it's sometimes cutting back on vices, well, actually pretty much all the time, gives you this space, gives you this room to breathe, where you can sit in meditation and really think about it, or, you know, go and see someone who can support you in diving deeper into those things.
Yeah, that's brilliant, because, you know, I kind of find that this idea probably, and I don't know whether you use the phrase of vice flipping or vice switching, right? But this whole notion that people are kind of finding that escapism because they're like, you know what, maybe no one's going to watch me doing this, but I can at least do this now. For example, I'm not going to have this chocolate, I'm going to have this sugar, for example. So I'm at least kind of on sugar. I don't have to say that. And I think that just means that they're not being honest with themselves, right? Because they're not kind of having that brutal confrontation with reality and the fact that, look, if you want to kind of make that change, you're living in denial, you're just kind of running away in that sort of, I guess, vicious loop in a sense, correct?
Yeah, totally. It's interesting that you bring up chocolate because I was chatting with a mutual friend of ours, Rob Gronbeck, who's also a performance coach. And we were talking about his chocolate that he has of a night. On a Friday night, he would have this block of chocolate. And I was like, is it really healthy? And he's quite health conscious. He's like, no, it's not. I just get it. And I was like, well, how can we, vice optimize this chocolate? So now he goes and he gets high quality chocolate. And because he measures his sleep, he measures like with his Whoop band, he measures everything. He started to realize that, and I think it's as much as it's about the nutrition that you're eating, it's also about the mindset, because if you're eating a bad chocolate, like full of sugar, it's not good for you. And it's almost self-deprecating. But if you go and you buy a nice artisanal chocolate that's made from somewhere local and you're like, you're proud of eating it, pride, that's like a powerful emotion to have. So that's really kind of the essence of vice optimization is finding pride in all of our habits and actions.
Yeah, Rob is brilliant. We're going to get him on Epiq Thursdays sometimes when schedule clears up. Should be fun. So moving on, I think you also spoke before we went live about this whole idea of placebos, right? How do placebos figure in this whole conversation on vice optimization?
They're only really fresh for me. I've just only started hearing about them. I guess everyone sort of knows that about what placebos are, which is kind of, you think you're getting the thing, but you're not. And physiologically, we can have the same reactions from medications, good and bad, which I find amazing, that we can also have the bad reactions. So with vice optimization, because food and things are so good now, like they're getting so good at creating products that are healthier, but we think are, the sort of bad vices. I'm fascinated to think about how you could potentially get, a box of chocolate that half of it is, full of sugar and the other half isn't. And just to see if you had one each night, what would happen to you over that period of time. And so that's for anything. I guess it'd be harder to do with a phone, but if you think about all of our vices that are kind of, we eat and those things, like how we should be able to test this stuff. And the reason I'm sort of excited about it is because with autoimmune diseases, the drugs that people take for them have a lot of side effects. And so they use these things called, I think it's nocebos, where they'll have like half of the packet will be a placebo, but they know it. So there's another like interesting element. So knowing that you're potentially not getting the thing and it's still having the same effect is kind of amazing to me.
Yeah, interesting. So Benny, I think I won't let you go without your answering, because you've got this immense wealth of knowledge and experience. I mean, particularly I'm stoked with the work that you're doing at Reunion and kind of the movement that you're building there. And I'm wondering, when you look at giving perspective, inspiration, guidance, coaching, what would be the 3 things or 5 things or N things that you feel are the protocols that you would recommend someone, to the one who wants to optimize performance, their vices, and to get in that state of high performance, optimal performance that serves them in all areas of their lives, whether they are at home, at work, out in the community, or in the world at large?
Yeah, I mean, to sort of tie in Reunion to that question, it's a great question. I think we need to collectively sit in nature more to find, sources of information within the world around us. If you're near the beach, go sit and have a look at the ocean. It's pretty amazing. It's got a lot of knowledge. So yeah, it's kind of like everything links back to just getting out of the 4 walls and just getting in amongst the nature and going and hanging out with animals. With Reunion, we went out to went actually back to my hometown, which is 10 hours south of where I am, and we did bushcraft and survival and just learning how to make a fire. It's like, your eyes light up like you're a little kid again, because it is flow and it's primal, and it's like, the world's a bit crazy at the moment. Like, we should be getting out and trying to learn these skills. It's all good, well and good to learn how to scale a company to whatever. But what I think is more important is how can we scale companies for impact? And I believe if we spend more time out in nature and with other humans, we'll be more inclined to scale for impact rather than IPOs or whatever.
Perfect. Okay. So nature is one. What else would you recommend?
My favorite ones are connection. So conversations. So I love like I'll call them frothy conversations. They're high flow for me. So having a conversation with yourself right now, even though I want to go to bed soon, I'll be buzzing and I'll probably find it hard. But really connecting with your loved ones and inquiring into, I have a ritual practice with my partner, Jackie. Every morning we go down the beach and we call it get. And so we ask each other, what are you grateful for? What are you excited for? And what are you taking action on today? So there's accountability. And then, yeah, it's really simple. It's 3 things. And you can do it with your friends, your colleagues, anyone. And it just sort of brightens the day, because sometimes you can be having a dark day and thinking about what you can get excited about is super powerful. And obviously everyone knows about gratitude. Breaking bread, making sure that you're sitting down and having those, like, I think everything I do tends to be either connection with other humans or going out in nature, like surfing, and really finding those things that bring you flow, even if you have to think back to what you did when you're a child.
Something you've said in the past, which I was like saying, this is into like having a morning conversation with yourself. How do you set that up? Is that important, and how do you set it up?
Yeah, I think that was when I was doing Qigong, like for the first time 3 years ago. And the teacher she said, you've got to meet yourself in the morning. That's the first thing you got to do. And even if you've got a hectic morning, even if you've got to jump straight on a Zoom call or whatever it is, or you've got your kids running in at you, it's how do you meet yourself? And I don't have kids at the moment, I won't say I'm lucky, but I have quite a bit of freedom. So I can go down to the beach and do those rituals with Jackie. But if you don't have that, it's just that breath. It's that conscious breath. I always say to my clients, breathe every time you remember to, because most of the time we forget to breathe. It sounds weird, but we do. And so can you take that conscious breath, in the morning, even if it's just, 3 seconds in, 3 seconds out through the nose. That's what I mean by meeting yourself. Because like she said, when I was learning this, she said, some of us don't meet ourselves till we get home from work at 8 o'clock at night, when we sit down to have a cup of tea. That's the first time we actually went, oh, wow, that was a day. And then you fall asleep and do it all again.
That's so true. Yeah, you have people kind of just hustle through life. I mean, hopefully the last few months have given people more chance to look at themselves, in the proverbial mirror, because they don't have to hustle out to get to the work in some shape or form, at least not physically speaking in that sense. So hopefully that's given them that opportunity. And I think now what you just said, makes so much sense, because if people take that, even if it's that 1 minute in the morning, they're not going to kind of come back in the evening saying, oh, it's been another wasted day, I'm going to start again tomorrow. And then, then it's again tomorrow, and then it's tomorrow, and then it never happens. You're kind of just running like this, crazy loop that, again, that's kind of the flywheel, so to say, over there, unfortunately.
Yeah, I'll give you one last thing. So overnight, before we go to sleep, we'll do go. So get, go. Go is what are you grateful for today? And always, what did you observe? And so if you did forget to do your taking action, or if you didn't manage to get excited today, you can observe it. But it's totally open-ended, so you basically observe whatever you want.
All right, so getting to wrap up, we've got nature, we've got get, we've got go, we've got the vice optimization, and I guess you want to pick maybe one at a time and kind of just hammer them away and kind of get mindful of it. So Benny, we're going to put links about what you do in the comments and in the show notes as well afterwards. But I think it's bennywallington.com. Is that the website that they can go on and learn more about what you do? And I think the work that you do at Reunion, I think it's reunion.earth. Is that right?
Yep, correct. Yeah.
Okay. So look, I mean, it's been an absolute honor to have you here, because then I appreciate you're kind of staying kind of reasonably late in your I guess, Queensland evening. But look, I mean, I've learned, I mean, to me, the get, I was doing a version of the get, and I think it's just made it so simple, right? You get, you go, and at the end of it, do what works for you. So again, hats off. If there's a final parting piece of, I guess, advice, perspective, inspiration you want to leave the audience with, what would you say?
Ask yourself, was it worth it every day? And see if you can make every day for the rest of your life worth it, whether it's just one moment or whether it's a whole day in high flow.
I love the power of questions. So that's a brilliant question. I love it. So everyone, thank you all for tuning in. Tell us in the comments what you thought of the brilliant, I guess, perspective that Benny has shared with us. We'll forward seeing you next week as well. We've got another amazing, I guess, a rat person just like Benny. This time back in the US, I would say. So we're kind of flipping from the end of the world, one side to the other one. But again, everyone, time out. See you guys next week. Thanks for tuning in.
Thanks, brother.